Husband abandoned me when I was going through depression. Now he wants to get a share of my inheritance, I just flat out divorced him. I'm a 30-year-old woman and I really need to share what's been weighing on my heart. It feels like I'm drowning in emotions and I just can't seem to keep my head above water anymore. The last 6 months have completely flipped my world upside down and I'm having a tough time processing everything. Half a year ago, I lost my mom to cancer and she was so much more than just a parent to me. She was my best friend, my go-to person, and my biggest cheerleader. Her absence has created a gap in my life that I don't think will ever be filled. We had such a close relationship and reminiscing about it brings a mix of joy and sadness. I can still picture those moments from my childhood when my mom would always make time for me, no matter how hectic her schedule was. She would sit with me for hours, helping with homework, listening to my goofy stories, and giving me advice on everything from handling bullies to picking out outfits for picture day. As I got older, our connection only grew stronger. During college, my mom was my anchor. I hit a rough patch in my second year with a tough class and I was ready to throw in the towel. But my mom stayed up late on the phone with me, cheering me on and helping me study. She even took the time to learn some of the material so she could quiz me. Her unwavering faith in me pushed me to keep going and I ended up nailing that class. On graduation day, she surprised me by flying in for the ceremony. She had told me she couldn't make it because of work, but there she was in the crowd, holding a huge homemade banner that said, "That's my girl." It was both embarrassing and amazing at the same time. That's just how my mom was, she always went above and beyond to show her love and support. When I landed my first job after college, I was a bundle of nerves before the interview. My mom dedicated so much time to help me find the right outfit for my interview, and then she even did practice interviews with me until I felt ready to go. She drove me to the interview and waited in the car, giving me a huge thumbs up as I walked in. When I got the job, she was the first person I called and her excited scream probably made my ears ring for days. My parents were pretty well off and being their only child, I always had what I needed. They also made sure to teach me the importance of hard work and being kind. My mom was especially active in charities and community work. She often took me along, which helped me understand social responsibility from a young age. 3 years ago, everything changed when my dad had an accident that left him in a wheelchair. It was a tough transition for all of us, especially for my mom. She became my dad's main caregiver while still managing her own business from home. I did my best to help out, visiting regularly and taking care of chores. Then, about a year and a half ago, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. It felt like everything came to a halt. How could this happen to my lively, caring mom, the one who was always there for others? It just didn't seem right. From that point on, my life revolved around taking care of her. Dad handled the financial side of her treatment, but I was the one who went with her to every appointment and chemo session. I'd sit by her side for hours during treatments, holding her hand when she felt sick and reading to her when she was too weak to hold a book. At home, I helped her deal with the side effects of chemo. I picked up cooking her favorite meals in a way that wouldn't upset her stomach. I'd gently brush her hair when it started to thin out, and I even went with her to pick out a wig when she decided she wanted one. Through everything, my mom stayed strong and positive. Even on her toughest days, she'd smile and tell me how proud she was of me and how strong I was. Those moments meant the world to me. My job took a hit because of all the time I had to take off. I was working as a marketing executive at a mid-sized company, and while my boss was understanding at first, my frequent absences started to wear on everyone. Projects got delayed, clients were unhappy, and my coworkers had to pick up my slack. I felt guilty, but I just couldn't put work ahead of taking care of my mom. Last month, I got called into a meeting with HR and my boss. They told me that because of my constant absences and declining performance, they had to let me go. I was heartbroken, but a part of me felt a sense of relief. Now I could focus completely on my mom without the stress of work hanging over me. But just 2 weeks after I lost my job, my mom passed away. The pain was, and still is, beyond words. It felt like a piece of me was torn away. I couldn't eat or sleep. Every room in the house was filled with memories of her, and it was just too much to handle. I kept waiting to hear her laugh, to catch a whiff of her perfume, to see her walk in with that bright smile. The fact that she was gone forever was unbearable. Throughout all of this, my husband Tom, 32M, wasn't really there for me. He was always caught up with work, hardly helping out at home or providing any emotional support. I tried to be understanding since his job as a financial analyst was demanding. But looking back, I see just how absent he was during one of the toughest times in my life. When my mom first got diagnosed, Tom promised he'd be there for me. He said we'd tackle this together. As the months passed, he started to drift away. He'd come home late from work, hardly acknowledging me or asking about mom. Whenever I tried to share my fears and worries, he'd wave me off, claiming he was too exhausted or had a big presentation to focus on. In mom's last weeks, Tom was almost like a ghost in our house. He'd leave for work before I even woke up and come back long after I was asleep. On the rare times he was home, he was glued to his phone or laptop, insisting he had urgent tasks to tackle. I felt incredibly alone when I needed support the most. After mom passed, Tom attempted to comfort me, but it felt empty. It was like he was just going through the motions, not really grasping or sharing my grief. He showed up at the funeral and stood by me as I greeted everyone, but there was this gap between us. It felt more like we were strangers pretending to be a grieving couple instead of true partners helping each other through a tough time. Since mom's death, I've been battling depression. Some days, getting out of bed feels impossible. The house is so quiet without mom's regular visits. I keep waiting to hear her voice or see her come through the door. I've lost interest in things I once loved and I find myself tearing up at random times during the day. The grief hits me in waves, sometimes leaving me breathless, other times numbing me to everything around. Lately, Tom has been acting strangely. He's been working late more often, always on his phone, and just generally distant. I tried to bring it up with him, but he brushed me off, saying work was just hectic. I wanted to trust him, to think he was just giving me space to grieve. But something felt off. This morning was a total disaster. Tom was in the shower, and his phone wouldn't stop buzzing on the nightstand. I took a quick peek and saw a message with heart emojis. My heart sank. I know I shouldn't have, but I grabbed his phone and opened the messages. What I discovered crushed me even more. Tom has been cheating on me with a coworker. The messages dated back months, even before my mom passed away. While I was taking care of my dying mother, dealing with my grief, and battling depression, my husband was sneaking around behind my back. The texts were filled with personal details, plans for secret meetups, and love declarations. It made me feel nauseous. How could he do this? How could he betray me when I needed him the most? When Tom finally got out of the shower, I confronted him. We had a massive blowout. I yelled, I cried, I threw things. How could he do this to me when I was already at rock bottom? How long had this been happening? Did our marriage mean nothing to him? Tom tried to defend himself, saying it was a mistake and that it didn't mean anything. He said he felt lonely and stressed, that he didn't know how to handle my grief. But I couldn't process it. All I could think about was his betrayal, how he left me when I needed him the most. In the heat of the moment, I told Tom to get out. The house is mine anyway, my parents helped with the down payment when we bought it. Tom tried to argue, but I stood my ground. I couldn't stand to look at him, let alone share a space with him. So now, here I am, alone in my house, feeling more lost and betrayed than ever. I've gone through a lot in just 6 months, losing my mom, my job, and now my marriage. I'm really struggling to figure out how to move on from all this. I feel angry, hurt, and honestly, pretty scared about what's next. I'm reaching out for some advice, support, or even just someone to listen. Has anyone else faced something like this? How did you handle it? How do you start to rebuild your life when it feels like everything's crumbled? And how do you learn to trust again after being hurt so deeply? Update. It's been a month since I asked Tom to leave, and a lot has happened since then. I wanted to share this update and express my gratitude for all the amazing support you gave me on my last post. Your thoughtful words and suggestions have really helped me through this tough time. First off, I think I should give you a bit more context about Tom and our relationship. We met about 5 years ago through a mutual friend, Sarah, at one of her house parties. At night, I was drawn to Tom right away. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in me. We ended up talking for hours, and I walked away feeling like I had met someone really special. What I didn't realize back then was that Tom had actually spotted me at another party a few weeks before and had been asking Sarah to introduce us ever since. At the time, I thought it was sweet that he was so eager to meet me. Now, looking back, I see it as the first sign I ignored. It hints at a level of persistence, or maybe even obsession, that feels unsettling in retrospect. The beginning of our relationship was a whirlwind of romance. Tom was incredibly attentive, always showering me with compliments and making grand gestures. He'd surprise me with flowers at work, plan amazing dates, and seemed to know exactly what I needed. I felt truly cherished and special. Even back then, there were hints that something was off. Tom had a possessive streak. He'd get annoyed if I hung out with friends for too long, especially if they were guys. He'd comment on my outfits, saying some were too revealing for work or social events. At the time, I just thought he was being protective or maybe a bit old-fashioned. I didn't realize he was gradually isolating me and trying to control my choices. He also had a knack for being subtly critical. He'd throw out casual remarks about my career, suggesting I should aim higher or put in more effort. He'd compare me to his exes or female coworkers, always making me feel a bit less than. I didn't see these as warning signs back then. I figured he was just motivating me to be my best self, not understanding how those comments were chipping away at my confidence. When we got engaged after 2 years, I thought it was the best day ever. Tom proposed in a big way at a basketball game, with the proposal on the big screen. Everyone cheered, and I said yes right away. It hit me later that he never really asked what kind of proposal I wanted. He just assumed I'd want something grand, not thinking I might have liked something more personal. Our wedding was the same, over the top and pricey. Tom wanted to invite everyone he knew, turning what I envisioned as a small intimate ceremony into a massive affair. I went along with it, convincing myself it was our special day and that compromise was part of marriage. I thought things would improve after we tied the knot. I imagined we'd grow together, support one another, and build a life as true partners. Instead, Tom became more distant and self-centered. He'd work late hours, come home exhausted, and wouldn't engage in any real conversations. Whenever I tried to discuss our future, like buying a house or starting a family, he'd just wave me off, claiming we had all the time in the world. When my mom got diagnosed with cancer, I really thought Tom would step up and be the supportive partner I needed. But he was nowhere to be found. While I was balancing my job and taking my mom to her appointments and chemo, Tom always had some excuse ready. He was busy with work, had an important meeting, or was just too tired. I kept making excuses for him, convincing myself he was just under a lot of stress. Now I realize he was just pretending to be busy while carrying on with his affair. The last month has been a rollercoaster of emotions. I've swung from anger to sadness to feeling completely numb and back again. There were times I missed Tom so much it felt like a physical ache, followed by bursts of rage where I wanted to destroy everything he ever gave me. I've questioned every single moment we shared, wondering if any of it was genuine, if he ever really loved me. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. 2 weeks ago, my dad passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. The shock and grief hit me hard. I felt like I couldn't catch my breath, like the walls were closing in. I had just lost my mom, and now my dad was gone too. I felt completely alone. My dad and I had always been close, but we became even tighter after my mom got sick. He was my rock, my voice of reason during tough times. Even from his wheelchair, he was a source of strength, always ready with a kind word or a cheesy joke to lift my spirits. Losing him so suddenly, right after my mom, felt like the universe was playing a cruel trick on me. Planning the funeral was one of the toughest things I've ever faced. Thankfully, some friends and family stepped in to lend a hand, and I can't express how grateful I am for that. Sarah, the friend who introduced me to Tom, was especially amazing during this time. She took time off from her job to help me sort everything out, stayed over at night so I wouldn't feel alone, and dealt with relatives who meant well but were a bit too much. I felt like I was in a fog the entire time, just going through the motions and struggling to grasp what was happening. At the funeral, I remember greeting people and accepting their condolences, but it all felt so unreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Then I spotted Tom at the funeral. He was across the room, looking serious in a dark suit. For a brief moment, I felt a wave of longing. I wished things could be different, that he could be the supportive partner I needed right then. But then I remembered his betrayal, and that feeling quickly shifted to anger and disgust. During the wake, some family members came up to me, suggesting that maybe it was time to forgive Tom and let him back into my life. They said I needed someone now that both my parents were gone. My Aunt Maria was particularly pushy, insisting that everyone deserves a second chance and that Tom seemed truly sorry. But I just couldn't do it. The pain was still too raw and the betrayal cut too deep. I couldn't forget how he had left me during Mom's illness or how he had been unfaithful while I was grieving. The idea of letting him back into my life made me feel sick. I found out that Tom had been reaching out to my friends and family, trying to get them to persuade me to take him back. He was portraying himself as the worried husband, concerned about his grieving wife. Just thinking about it makes my stomach turn. How could he use my parents' deaths to sneak back into my life? During the wake, my Aunt Liz, Dad's sister, pulled me aside. She's always been the no-nonsense one in the family, the one who speaks her mind. She warned me to watch out because she'd heard whispers that Tom was after my inheritance. With my parents gone, I'm set to inherit everything. It's a lot: property, investments, savings. Aunt Liz cautioned me that Tom might try to weasel his way back in to get his hands on the cash. I thanked her for the heads up and promised to stay alert. Sure enough, just a few days after the funeral, Tom showed up at my place. He was all tears and apologies, begging for forgiveness, claiming he'd made a huge mistake and wanted to be there for me now. He went on about how much he missed me, how empty his life felt without me, and how he'd do anything to make things right. For a second, I almost bought it. A part of me wanted to believe him, to let him wrap me in his arms and comfort me. But then I remembered what Aunt Liz said, so I decided to test him. I brought up the inheritance, saying I was feeling overwhelmed and didn't know what to do with such a big amount of money and property. I mentioned I was thinking about selling everything and donating the money to charity just to escape the burden. Tom's eyes lit up in a way that made me uneasy. He quickly suggested we could split the inheritance and that he could help me manage it all. He launched into a whole spiel about investments and financial planning, getting more excited with every word. It was like he completely forgot he was supposed to be there for his grieving wife. That was all I needed to hear. I locked eyes with him and made it clear he wouldn't see a dime of my inheritance. The only thing coming his way was divorce papers. The shock on his face was almost laughable. He stammered, trying to backtrack, claiming that wasn't his intention and that he just wanted to help. But I held my ground. I told him to leave and not to come back unless it was with a lawyer. Once he was gone, I fell apart. Not because I missed him, but because I finally realized how much of our relationship had been fake. He never really loved me, he'd just been using me. I cried for the time I'd wasted, for the love I thought I had, and for the future I'd envisioned that would never happen. The next day, I called a divorce lawyer and kicked off the process. I'm determined to safeguard myself and my inheritance. Tom tried to fight it, arguing he deserved half of everything since we were married. But thankfully, my parents had pushed for a prenup when we tied the knot. At the time, I thought it was overkill, but now I'm so grateful for their wisdom. These last few weeks have been a wild ride. I'm mourning my parents, furious with Tom, and anxious about what's next. But I'm also starting to feel a spark of hope. For the first time in ages, I'm making choices for myself, not trying to make anyone else happy. I've started seeing a therapist to help me work through everything. It's tough, but I think it's making a difference. I'm navigating through my grief over my parents, my frustration with Tom, and my worries about what lies ahead. My therapist is helping me identify patterns in my past relationships and guiding me on how to establish healthy boundaries. I'm also contemplating my next steps, maybe launching a business or heading back to school. For the first time in ages, the future feels like a blank canvas, brimming with opportunities rather than just responsibilities. It's a mix of fear and excitement. I'm starting to rediscover parts of myself that I lost during my time with Tom. My friend Sarah has been a rock for me throughout this journey. She keeps apologizing for introducing me to Tom, but I've reassured her that it's not her fault. She's been spending a few nights a week with me, helping me go through my parents' things and just being there for me when I need to vent or cry. I'm also reconnecting with some old friends I lost touch with during my marriage. Hearing their thoughts on my relationship with Tom has been eye-opening. Many of them had concerns, but didn't know how to voice them. This has made me realize how isolated I had become. The divorce process is still ongoing and it's pretty stressful. Tom is fighting tooth and nail for every cent, trying to drag things out. But I'm holding my ground. I've come to understand that I'm stronger than I ever thought I was. Thanks again for all your support. It truly means the world to me. Your encouraging words and advice have been a lifeline during this tough time. I'll keep you posted once the divorce is wrapped up. Update 2. Hey everyone. It's been 4 months since I last checked in, and I've got some good news to share. First off, the divorce is finally finalized. It wasn't a walk in the park. Tom tried to stretch things out to challenge the prenup, claiming he deserved more. He even went as far as to say he helped with my parents' care, which was just a flat-out lie. In the end, the law really came through for me. The prenup stood strong, and Tom walked away with just what he had when we got married. Signing those final papers felt like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders, closing that chapter for good. As for the inheritance, everything's been sorted out. I'm now the sole heir to my parents' estate. It's a mix of emotions, to be honest. I'd trade it all in a second just to have my parents back. But I'm committed to using this opportunity in a way that honors them. Speaking of which, I have some exciting news. I've launched a small business. It's something I've always wanted to do but never had the guts or funds to start. It's a boutique marketing agency dedicated to helping local small businesses boost their online presence. We're just a month in, and things are looking great. We've already secured a few clients, and the feedback has been amazing. Running my own business is tough, but it's also super fulfilling. For the first time in ages, I actually look forward to waking up. I'm applying the skills I've gained over the years in a way that feels significant. Plus, being my own boss means I can create my own schedule and focus on what matters. I've also set up a scholarship fund in my parents' honor at the local community college. It's designed to support single parents who want to continue their education. It feels great to give back and keep my parents' legacy alive. Emotionally, I'm in a much better spot now. The sadness over losing my parents is still there, and I doubt it'll ever fully fade. But it's not overwhelming anymore. I can think of them and smile at the good times instead of just feeling heartache. Therapy has been a game changer in helping me process everything and rebuild my self-esteem after what Tom put me through. I've started volunteering at a nearby animal shelter on weekends, and it's been such a healing experience. Focusing on caring for these animals has really helped me, and I'm thinking about adopting a dog soon. The idea of having that kind of unconditional love in my life feels perfect right now. Things aren't all sunshine and rainbows, though. There are still tough days when loneliness creeps in or when the changes feel overwhelming. But overall, I really think I'm heading in the right direction. I'm getting to know myself again, free from the burden of a toxic relationship and the stress of looking after sick parents. A huge shout out to everyone who's been following my journey and supporting me. Your kind words and advice have truly been a lifeline during my toughest times. I hope my experiences can inspire others facing similar challenges. It really does get better, even when it seems impossible. I'm excited about this new chapter in my life. For the first time in ages, I'm looking forward to what the future holds. Cheers to fresh starts and new opportunities. Thank you for watching this video. For more content like this, subscribe. I post stories like this from across the internet.